Hi there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. Happy New Year. We trust that you're having a great holiday season with your family and your friends. You know, New Year brings a fresh start, and it was a heck of a 2013 here in Michigan. You could call it historic. So tonight we're going to list off the biggest stories of the year and take a look how they impacted all of us. Plus, we're going to look ahead at what's sure to be making news in 2014. Joining me now are My Week contributors Nolan Finley. He is the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I feel like we need some party hats here.
We need a little bubbly.
And need to pop some champagne,
There was
right?
no Y213K bug.
Right, no. We are safely into 2014 now. But it's always nice to take a look back and to see what 2013 was all about. And before we take a look at the specific stories, so was it a good year? Was 2013 a good year for our state and region?
No, it was a crappy year. Terrible year.
Well, and then we should just probably end the show right now, right? We're done.
I mean, we could sort of look for the silver lining, but
Come on, Nolan. Come on, help me look for the silver. Stephen?
Lucky 13.
Lucky 13. So it was. I would say it was a historic year. It was a historic year for Michigan. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it was a tough
historically bad year.
All right. Okay. The glass definitely is half empty.
I mean, it was a good year
here
in terms of the state's continued economic recovery. We're certainly keep coming ahead. The auto industry keeps progressing. It was a fabulous year for the auto industry.
It absolutely was.
They posted record sales, or sales they haven't seen in 5, 6, 7 years. Really solid profits, and GM got out from under government control. Really good year for the auto industry, which means it was a good year for the state economy. We're adding jobs. People are starting to look at Michigan in a different light. I guess it was just a bad year for the city of Detroit.
I was just going to say, so there's a little bit of sunshine there. And so, Stephen, do you now in 2014 say, glad that year was over?
Yeah, well, I mean, you go back to January of 2013, we didn't even have an emergency manager. We were still talking about whether there might be a second consent agreement.
Were they going to run out of money?
Were they going to run out of money? And, you know, by June, we had an emergency manager, and he was talking about bankruptcy. So, you know, it escalated very quickly, and you know, there wasn't a lot of hopeful stuff to happen unless you see the bankruptcy as hopeful. And I have been a big advocate of saying that, you know, bankruptcy is a step forward, not back. That restructuring makes sense, but
you're stepping forward onto glass with bare feet when you look at some of the repercussions. I mean, we still don't know how it's going to impact retirees, how it's going to impact the Detroit Institute of Art and other city assets. The pain is still very much yet to come in this thing.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look, because I asked both of you to come up with a list of your top 3 stories from 2013. So let's go ahead and take a look at Nolan's list first. Top stories of 2013. All right, we already started talking about it. We'll get more in depth. Detroit bankruptcy, Duggan's election to be mayor of Detroit. Now that was in terms of politics in Detroit. That stands up there. And then the Obamacare meltdown. All right, so those were Nolan's top 3. And now let's go ahead and take a look at Stephen's top 3. Detroit bankruptcy. All right, this was a gimme year. We all knew what pretty much the number 1 is. The Washington stalemate, which is interesting because I think a lot of people have forgotten about that. And Detroit sports teams fizzle. I've always thought secretly deep down inside you just want to do a sports talk radio show. And that's about it.
I just really want to be on 97.1 The Ticket. One afternoon.
Just for one day because of our poor Tigers and Lions.
Yeah, Tigers and Lions both just, you know.
U of M?
That one I'm not even going to talk about.
Sorry.
Yeah, you know, this is supposed to be a sports mecca. And 2013, we just couldn't get it done.
All right,
close.
Let's go ahead and let's talk about, we already started talking about a little bit about the Detroit bankruptcy. And I think what was interesting, what you said, Stephen, about when we started in January, we didn't know what this year was going to hold. And as I look back at even our shows that we did here on My Week and talking about yet another historic week for Detroit, will Detroit run out of money? It has really been a staggering year in terms of the financial review team in February came back. All of a sudden, that meeting that the governor said we are going to have an emergency manager, that you were there as well, that we brought to everyone. It really has been an amazing journey to this point, Nolan.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was, nobody could have predicted how this would unfold, largest municipal bankruptcy in the history of the country. It's just astounding. And you know, Kevin Orr coming in and starting to do some of the things he's done, starting to identify the depth of the problem. I think a year ago we knew things were bad, but until you could start actually seeing it on paper and seeing the depth of the mismanagement, of the financial woes in the city, the mess at the pension funds, you really did reach a conclusion that everything was broken, and you wonder why this bankruptcy didn't come, you know, years ago.
And the judge did say that, but I think it is interesting. And until we actually saw the numbers, do you think we needed this process?
Oh, I think we need it. I think a lot of people need that sort of splash of cold water in the face. I mean, we've been in denial a long time in Detroit about the depth and breadth of the problems that we had, and certainly about the historic sort of context of this. I mean, a 60-year decline, if you really take a look at it in terms of population, in terms of the financial position, in terms of the kind of management that we've had in the city. I mean, we really have made a mess of things for a very long time. We had a lot of help doing it. The state was an enabler in that process. The national deindustrialization was a root cause of it. But of course, there were lots of horrible decisions and mistakes made right here in the city of Detroit that kept us on that path, and you know, finally we just hit the point where—
And corruption.
Yeah, corruption. You had to do something. You got to do something different.
Okay, so hindsight is 2020. Obviously, we're in bankruptcy now. But Nolan, when Kevin Orr first came in, did you think that that's where we were going to go?
Oh yeah, I think you just look at his resume. This isn't a government guy. He wasn't a guy who comes in and turns around businesses. He's a guy who takes folks into bankruptcy court. He's very good at it. Hopefully he'll be very good at it for Detroit. He's still got to negotiate settlements with the creditors. He's still got to make a deal with the pension funds. But this is what he does. I don't think anybody could have looked at that appointment and say, well, maybe we won't go into bankruptcy court. That was a given as soon as his name was mentioned.
Are we in a good position now? When I say we, is the city of Detroit in a good position now?
Well, in terms of the bankruptcy, I think it is. I mean, I think the way municipal bankruptcy is structured, the city holds most of the cards, and if you've got a manager in place who understands how to play those cards, you know, you can restructure your debt and the city operations in a way that will put us ahead. I mean, I think Kevin Orr has taken a lot of hits for a lot of the things that have happened over the last 7 months. Some of them his own making, some stupid stuff that he said, and the slow pace of change at City Hall. But I think in 2014, people will start to see the real value he brings, which is that he goes into that bankruptcy court and has been there before, understands how to pull the strings, and will really put Detroit in terms of its balance sheet in a position it hasn't been in my lifetime, which is a tremendous gift that I don't think everybody is quite acknowledging.
But the big question is, will it stay that way? I mean, he can do a lot of things. He can fix a lot of problems, and he could leave the city next September with a very good balance sheet and in good financial health. But I'm not sure we still in this city have accepted that a lot of this was our fault. Most of this was our fault, and things have to change. The culture has to change. You can't keep operating the way we have. We've got to shed this entitlement attitude. We've got to stop looking at the city as if it's a job provider and a contract provider instead of a service provider. We have to adopt a culture of good government, of efficient government. I don't know that we're there yet.
Who are you saying that still have those feelings? The residents of Detroit,
everybody's
or
got to come to the
people who worked
realization.
with the city?
Everybody. I mean, everybody's got to come to the realization that we are in a very bad shape. And this city was insolvent. You still have these clueless folks out in front of the courthouse saying, screw the banks, not us. And, you know, the banks are going to walk out of here probably with less than 80% or less than 20% of what the city owes them. And you still have people thinking, oh gosh, the bank should write some big check to get us out of this. Well, that's not really how banks work. We've got to come to reality that the responsibility for fixing this rests with Detroit.
Let me ask you this, Stephen. Do you think Detroit has been treated fairly in the national media during this entire process, this last year of consent agreement, emergency manager, and now going into bankruptcy.
Well, there's been a lot of.
Is the Region's story being told accurately?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of sloppy work that's being done. You know, it's very difficult to come in to Detroit from someplace else, spend a couple days and get the picture right. I mean, it's a very complicated story with an enormously important history. Not everybody has told that story, I think, accurately. I think, you know, I think we have done a better job this year. Local media of telling Detroit's story than perhaps we ever have. I mean, the bankruptcy really has inspired some of the deepest journalism at both papers that I've seen ever in terms of telling the story about this place and the people who are here, the neighborhoods, the industry, the government, how all of this sort of worked together to get us into this.
But we're
spot.
thin-skinned here, and we have an unrealistic expectation of what people should be seeing when they come here. We want these out-of-town press to get off the plane, come downtown, and say, "Oh wow, you got a Starbucks in Midtown." Well, these people go to other cities where there's not, where that's sort of a routine thing, you know. And we get excited if a pancake shop opens on Jefferson, and that's not really what people see of your visitors here. You see the huge abandoned buildings that remain in the core of downtown. You see that god-awful train station sitting out there. You see the blight, and it's hard for people not to notice. We tend to squint and not see it all because we're used to it.
I thought
it's hard from out-of-towners
If
not
I
to
see
notice.
another story with the picture of the train
Yeah,
station.
well, but I did think I thought a sort of key moment in the national narrative about Detroit was when Bob Simon of 60 Minutes came and did his piece, and I thought he was an interesting person to do it because he spent most of his career overseas, right, in war-torn third world countries, and so his perspective when he came to Detroit was that, comparing this city to places where, you know, people are shelling buildings and things like that, and he said, and he got a lot of flack for this, he said it reminded him of Mogadishu, which is the capital of Somalia, which is a really desperately awful place. I think that's important for people here to hear. That's not a disingenuous statement on his part. That's what the place looks like to him, because he's been in Mogadishu and he's been in Sarajevo and all these places where things look desperate. That's what this feels like in Detroit. If you live in the city and operate in it every day, it is a desperate place, and it seems like a third world war-torn city. So we got to start facing up to that and start saying, change the picture, change what we're doing, and change the way it feels so that we can change the narrative. I mean, the story follows reality to some extent.
Two other things that I want to get to real quick when we're talking about 2013. One, let's just touch quickly on the mayoral election in Detroit and the fact that Mike Duggan, he was on the ballot, he was off the ballot, he's back on, now he's a write-in, now he was back on the ballot, and he won.
It was crazy. It was an election that could only happen here. I mean, because look, a guy won a write-in campaign, that never happens, and then you had all of these suits challenging the vote count, and nobody knew whether first Duggan won by 30 points, and then Penny won by 5 points. I mean, it was just complete craziness throughout. But at the end of the day, a white suburbanite was elected mayor in the city with the highest percentage of African-American residents in the nation. That's remarkable.
Oh yeah, I mean it's historic, right? And who would have predicted again that it could happen? You know, the day that he got kicked off the ballot, even Mike Duggan was saying, "Well, you know, that's
I'm
it.
done. I think I'm good. I think we're going to take a step back."
Work. And he, you know, clawed his way back in and got people to figure out how to write his name properly on the ballot, which almost nobody's been able to do in any community.
I know, major
But
writing campaign.
give Cindy Paskey a lot of credit for this. She was the one who stood up, public meeting, and said, let's support Mike Duggan in a write-in campaign. Mike Duggan hadn't even thought of a write-in campaign.
Right.
And and when he first heard her say it, he said, like everybody else, are you nuts? But she put the money up, and others started putting the money up, and it took about 2 weeks, but they convinced him to come back and try it. And I don't think he even believed it was possible.
All right, two other things, kind of both of you put in the Washington stalemate, the government shutdown, and also Obamacare. And that's two things that you guys have fought about, probably the most two things, bitterly
wrestled
on
about
this
it again in
show. There's been some elbows
Grease up,
thrown
Steve.
on both sides. Stephen, do you really think people are going to remember the shutdown?
Well, I mean, I think the shutdown is emblematic of a much bigger stalemate that's gone on in Washington for a very long time. Now, at the end of the year, we saw, I think, some daylight in there. We've got this sort of core group of, I think it's 14 senators and representatives who are working together, who came up with a budget deal that everybody seemed to say, all right, well, it doesn't solve all of our problems, but it solves some of the immediate issues. And now let's keep talking about some of these other things. So I think 2013 might end up being the year that we sort of about face on that and walk away from the cliff of, of economic disaster every 6 months and start governing again.
The rollout of Obamacare was abysmal.
Oh,
Everyone can probably agree with that.
And that's just the first step of its abysmalness. I think if
New word.
if the only problem was the rollout, they might survive this. But you're seeing people who didn't expect to be dumped off policies getting dumped off policies. You see people with private insurance seeing their premiums double, triple, seeing their deductibles go way up. 2014, you're going to see the repricing of policies, and it'll be interesting to see if the anger continues, if the frustration continues, or if the administration finds another way to postpone the full impact till after the elections.
All right, one thing that you guys both left off your list that I'm going to have to put on the bottom would be Kwame Kilpatrick's conviction. Guilty, guilty, guilty.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge, and again, look at everything we're talking about that happened in 1 year.
Yeah.
And he was a guy we both know very well.
Yeah.
And, I think at one time we both thought he was a swell guy,
Yeah.
right? And, 32 years, did he end up with 32 years?
I think it's 32?
32
28,
years
32.
in
So it's over. You don't ever have to mention his name again, correct?
Well, it's over for his life's over. I mean, he's going to be older than
He'll be
me
an old
when he gets
man.
out of prison.
He will be an old man when he gets out of prison. That's
And
that's
that's not,
unfortunate.
Yeah.
and that's not something to celebrate. I mean, he deserved it. I mean, he absolutely deserved it. They still don't know where about $1 billion is. And, they don't know if it's in his pocket or somebody else's or just squandered. But he was a young man with tremendous potential, had a family. And it is the most wasteful situation I think I've ever seen.